Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley Brewer. You're with TalkTV, on radio, online and on your smart speaker. Now, the Prime Minister has vowed to stop militant trade unions derailing Christmas this year, again, after announcing new laws to ensure trains continue to run during strikes. Rishi Sunak is bringing forward legislation to force rail operators to run 40% of their normal timetable, even when staff walkouts occur, with minimum service levels also to be introduced for ambulance workers and border security staff as well. Well, joining me right now in the studio is Eddie Dempsey. He's Assistant General Secretary of the RMT Transport Union. Also, still with me in the studio is Tom Slater, editor at Spiked Online. Good afternoon to you both. Eddie, a couple of other things I want to ask you about as well. But I mean, you know, you're one of those militant trade union leaders. I mean, when they talk about these people, they mean you. We've seen, look, Christmases have been ruined by enough governments in recent years with Tier 4 and lockdowns and goodness knows what, without rail unions last year making it impossible for many people to travel across the country on crucial days, lots of people having to cancel their events. Even people, a lot of people who would support, as I would, the right of trade unions, the right to withdraw your labour, would say, yeah, but you know what? We still need to have these basic public services running so that people can go about their lawful duty. It's right that you should have to at least man a minimum level of service on strike days, isn't it?
Well, I don't think so. I think the purpose of this legislation is really to go to the heart of what it means to be a trade unionist. So the centrepiece of this will be the issuing of work notices by employers, where they'll name individual trade union members, and those people will have to break their own strike, having voted to take strike action, or they'll face dismissal.
So the union will name them, or the
employer will name them. They'll have to draw up a work notice, and then
these are the people who are crucial to running those 40% of services.
Well, it's a bit difficult to see exactly how it's going to work yet because they haven't published the regulations or the guidance note yet. But
I have a funny feeling even after they publish it, we won't be quite sure how
No, me too. So what they will do, for example, in train operating companies, they've said they'll run a 40% service, but station workers are not part of this, just train crew. So they'll issue a notice, and on that notice will be names of individual workers, and they'll send it to us, and we will have to identify who our members are and tell them to go and break the strike. That's what the intention of legislation is.
But it won't be breaking a strike. If you're down to only 40% of the service, that is still a massive impact on the travelling public, and it's a massive impact on ticket sales, on profits. That's still going to impact the employer. Yeah,
it will. And this is only on primary routes, so this doesn't cover the whole railway. So there may be suburban routes where this doesn't apply at all.
Which are often, by the way, the routes which people most rely on to get to and from work because there aren't alternatives.
And then there's different rules for infrastructures, so we don't know exactly what they mean yet, but they've said infrastructure services will be provided between 6 o'clock in the morning and 10 p.m. So if you're a signaller working in a railway, you can't 40% signal a piece of the railway. Either you signal it or you don't. So it may be the case that if you're a signaller or a maintenance worker, you will have no right to strike at all between those hours. So that'd be wide open to legal challenge. We think this is an egregious breach of personal freedoms and the right to be in a trade union.
It sounds to me, actually, it might just be unworkable practically more than anything else.
We think that too, yeah.
However, you talk about the right to strike is very important. I'm someone who people say, oh, you've got certain political views, you must be anti-unions. No, trade unions are the reason why I got things like maternity leave, and sick pay, and the holiday pay and things. If you're on staff. Now, these things weren't given to people and ordinary workers in this country out of the goodness of employers' hearts. They were hard won. So I always understand the importance of trade unions. However, when you work in the public sector, when you provide a service that is crucial for other people getting to work and going about their daily lawful business, your impact is far greater. I've always likened this, if supermarket staff at Sainsbury's go on strike, I can go to Tesco or vice versa. Trains go on strike. If I haven't got a car, there's the coach services, but often those are jam-packed. It's not an equivalent service. So do we, you might have the right to strike working in the RMT and working on the railways, but does your right to strike trump everyone else's right to go about their lawful business?
Well, right now, the International Labour Organisation, they produce a report every year on trade union freedoms around the world. And they rank countries between 1 and 5, 1 being decent rights, 5 being absolutely no rights. Today, before this legislation is passed, we're ranked as 4, and that is systematic breaches of trade union freedoms. We're on the same par as Saudi Arabia, and El Salvador today.
They have trade unions in Saudi Arabia.
Right, so we've got as much rights in Britain today
but this is
as we have in El Salvador.
This is an absolute nonsense, Eddie, with all due respect. We've seen non-stop strikes in the last year in teachers, we've seen border staff, rail unions, doctors, nurses, everyone else. So you're saying you don't have rights to strike? Of course you do.
Well,
Some of the things you don't like are things like having a minimum number of people taking part in the ballot. So it's not a bunch of loony extremist militants. It's ordinary members of and having a minimum amount of people actually saying they want to actually go on strike. Those are perfectly reasonable requirements.
Well, we've beaten all of those requirements every time they put up...
therefore, they're legitimate strikes.
Julie, every time they put new legislation up, we just get more effective and better at what we do.
OK, then why does it bother you then?
Well, I'm telling you...
You've just said we're being stopped from doing it, and then you just said you're getting more effective.
So the government's own impact assessment has said this legislation is going to lead to more and more prolonged strikes than we've currently got.
Why?
So, well, for a start off, we might not take strike action in the way they want. We may have to think of more creative ways of taking
People are just going to call in and say, come on, work to rule. Half of the railways is run on overtime, isn't it? So you're just going to be working to rule.
So there'll be a lot of people that call in sick. And, we've got a policy of non-compliance. We're not going to comply with this legislation. So they want to put direct responsibilities on our picket supervisors to make people go into work. So we might not have pickets. We might do something else.
Okay.
So they're going to try and ban particular types of strike action. We will have to be creative. And the other thing that's going to happen is because this legislation is discretionary, we're now going to be writing to all of the employers we deal with saying, as this is discretionary, we're asking you to guarantee that you're not going to issue a work notice. And if they say they're going to, then we're going to be in a dispute.
Then you go on.
Now, Julie, we were just coming to
laugh.
So look, we're just coming to a point here where we've had the U-turn on the ticket offices. We thought, right, now we're going to get a settlement on pay. We can end these rail strikes now and get back to a period of good negotiations and good spirit around the table. That's all out the window. This has just escalated everything again. Just at the point where we thought we were going to...
We're always just at the point. I'm going to come back to those negotiations. Tom Slater...
Well, you might be surprised.
What do you make of this? Do you think the government's being unreasonable?
Yes, I mean, I take the point about whether or not these things are actually going to be workable in the first place. There's often a lot with Tory governments, a lot of kind of grimacing at trade unions because they want to kind of channel the spirit of Thatcher. It plays well to their base. Often in terms of what it actually materialises into is not entirely obvious. But at the same time, I think these particular restrictions seem to be particularly chilling around the right to strike because of effectively compelling people to break strikes they might themselves have voted for. And that's something which I think is breaching us into a new territory, especially in the context of we do have very punishing trade union laws in this country in comparison to other places, even across Europe.
Similarly, what way punishing?
Similarly, there's also been this point about, yes, there has been this upsurge in trade union activity over the past couple of years, but it's from a very low historical base. So you've got these kind of clampdowns coming in the context of, yes, an upsurge in trade union militancy, but that's only in the context of a protracted squeeze on living standards, real terms pay cuts for many people. So it just feels entirely out of whack. It seems like mainly because it's Tory politicians like to posture against trade unions. It gives them a bit of a buzz, as it were. But also what they're encroaching upon is something quite important, which is the right to withdraw your labour and not be compelled to break a strike.
Although, of course, we see, say, with the some of the health unions, the BMA, the requirement to provide emergency care. Although that we understand, that is basically voluntary.
My aunt was a nurse in the NHS all her working life, and they've got a different culture, and they would voluntarily run a minimum service, you like, in health because of the implications for the people they're looking after.
Yeah.
We've got a completely different setup. And this legislation is really going to make it very individual. So we've got members like me, I have to say, who've got a very principled position on this. My father was a member of my union, my grandfather was. None of us have ever crossed the picket line and we don't believe in it. And there's no piece of legislation or instruction from a trade union official or anyone else who's going to make us do it.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people out there like that, and those people will face dismissal and the union will face financial penalties and all the rest of it.
But there's a big difference between someone, there's awful scenes in the miners' union, people shouting scab at people just wanted to earn a living, who couldn't survive on the strike pay, and someone crossing the line and saying, I'm not sticking with the union, and someone, as part of the legal requirements for the union to strike, being told, okay, you're the people who has to stay at work. That's not the same thing.
It is different, so the other point to make here is we've still got to see how a lot of this stuff works out because none of the regulations are published. But the main thing is today, we were supposed to have an announcement of Great British Railways in the King's Speech. So this follows a U-turn on the booking offices, a U-turn on HS2, whatever you think about it, and now Great British Railways is in the bin. So now we've got this piece of legislation instead, which has got us talking about a very minute part of the railway, when the railway itself is in dire straits and badly needs some direction.
It certainly is. I mean, it's an absolute joke. I think if you get a train nowadays, and although, let's face it, most of the travelling public don't use trains 1 year to the next, and that is one of the issues with your negotiating position. But, I mean, if it arrives on time, I mean, you're just absolutely shocked, aren't you? Which is not how it should be. Let's talk about where you are in that negotiation, because we're seeing some developments today, say, with the doctors, consultants and junior doctors, the BMA. There's some talk about some sort of quite sort of a nod and a wink, extra payment to them that won't sort of show up as a sort of official deal, which would possibly get them back round the table and actually negotiating a possible end to those strikes, which would be massively impactful on patients in the NHS. Where are you in terms of your negotiations? Because for so long we've just heard the whole, Transport Secretary won't meet with us, this won't happen, we're not talking about, the right stuff. Where are you?
So we're meeting our executive later today, who will be giving us a direct negotiating mandate. We have been in discussion with our partners in the RDG, who've been awaiting the green light from ministers to make an approach to us. So
Rail Delivery Group.
Rail Delivery Group. So we were hopeful we were in the sort of like a final furlong, if reaching a deal on money now. The reforms that were supposed to be associated with this deal have been removed as a result of the public consultation on ticket offices. But this is a bit of a curveball, this announcement from last night. So we'll have to see how that impacts all of this. As I said, it's a bit of an escalation in the context of where we were.
I just had this sort of feeling in my head that we're just going to have strikes from the militant wing of the trade union movement, and you are part of that militant wing forever, because I completely accept that a lot of this is about paying conditions. I do accept that, because you have seen real terms cuts in pay, as most people have had.
4 years without a pay rise.
But you've also seen massively plummeting services, and people got to keep their jobs during lockdown, which other people didn't. And you weren't at risk. I mean, I went on a couple of trains during lockdown. There was nobody on the trains. There was no risk to anybody, no more than anyone working in the supermarket, and they didn't see the same pay rises you're demanding.
We had people working in close quarters in vans out maintaining the railway infrastructure.
So
a lot of railway workers.
So were loads of people, mate.
So
were loads of people, and you know what? I'm not sure how long we can trade on that. But at the end of the day, what your real aim is, like a lot of those trade unions, of which that sort of wing of the trade unionism movement, you want to oust a Tory government. This is politically motivated.
We're not affiliated to the Labour Party. The Labour Party kicked us out years ago. All right, we will have the same stance towards whoever's in power. We will campaign aggressively on the issues that are important to our members, whether they're wearing a blue ribbon or a red ribbon. This Tory government has made an absolute mess of the railway. We would like to see them go. But we'll be fighting a Labour government if they come in just as hard for the interests that are at stake for our members. And look, our members haven't
Does Keir Starmer know that?
I think he does know that. We don't pull any punches with any of the politicians, no matter what ribbon they wear. And our members haven't had a pay rise in 4 years, Julia. That's where
nothing
we are.
at all?
So, no, in this dispute, no.
What's the latest offer?
Everywhere else, we've made settlements. Everywhere else, we've made settlements. We are only on strike where we can't get a deal for our members.
What's the latest offer?
The latest offer, we haven't had a fresh offer, is still 5% plus 4%. But the difference now, Julia, is it was predicated...
5% plus 4%. I mean, it's welcome in maths. Hold on a mo.
Over 2 years.
9%.
But it was...
9% over 2 years.
It was predicated on all of these changes arising from the closure of booking offices. Okay. But now that's gone, it should really make things a bit easier to get a settlement.
Can I just check?
Without the announcement of this legislation.
Christmas this year.
Yeah.
A family's going to be able to travel by train reliably.
We haven't named any strike action since late summer in this dispute. We've been on a campaigning footing with the public, and it's worked. So we haven't named any strike action in quite a significant.
Well, you can be quite popular. You can be quite popular as a trade union over strike action, as long as you're not actually affecting the public.
I think the problem is we've been too popular. So the campaign we've run on ticket offices has been so popular. I think the government's been a bit envious of that, and are now giving us a bit of a dig back.
That's what you think this is?
Maybe. Also that, and it's a cover for the fact that they're not announcing Great British Railways in the King's Speech. It's another U-turn on railways.
Tom Slater, is this just another PR exercise by the government?
Well, everything that they announce seems to be mainly just sort of an empty threat or a press release. They seem incapable of agreeing on anything or pushing anything through. We'll wait to see on this particular piece of legislation, these particular plans, but I do wonder how much of it is just going to go by the wayside in the midst of the party just seems to be in like permanent crisis management mode rather than doing anything that they claim that they want to do.
Yeah, indeed. Listen, I do stay there, Eddie, and also Tom. I might get your thoughts actually, or back on what we're just going to go to now.